Quindi non ti preoccupare. Perché sono andata in una scuola italiana? Un po' un casino.
Sì, Carla, you don't want to go yet.
Penso io. No. Let's start again, please.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Guarda che Patrizia è la loca quella lunga fatica. Okay, welcome back. So I asked Alessandra to stay like 3 more minutes and for some short questions, and then we are going to have 20 minutes on networking, and then we have
No. So after so we have a couple of minutes with Alessandra that she will answer any questions you have. And then we have Camila presenting, and then we have probably 30 minutes with Alison introducing the networking activity. Probably the first part of the presentation of Alison is just taking some other projects and seeing how the networking was done. It's true. How many minutes?
No, you're done. So is there any question for Alessandra from the audience? No, nobody? Okay, I wanna like that, you know, I'm starting something we will discuss for the next months. So just I find very interesting many things you said. First of all, like the idea, of course, we are animal among animals, and so like the transversality we have by nature by working with different species, which is not immediately perceived by medical people, which are used to work on the human species, but it's very important because not only some disease can walk back and go back to other type of animals, but new reservoirs can, as you say, like start with the inverse zoonosis. So this is a crucial point, I think, which we have to consider. And also the idea of ecotone, I think it's amazing. But I wanted to to ask you something about the number of humans that will be populating the planet. Like you made a prevision.
Not me, yes.
And for me, no, I know. You presented a number which I find very scary because I think we will not be able to support that type of population, of human population. But what I was going to ask is that, since infectious diseases are density dependent factor, and we are I think, do you think we are living, over the carrying capacity of the planet? And if your answer is yes, so this means that we will have more and more outbreaks, which is what probably will happen. Do you think there is a solution, and how optimistic you are? Is it too much?
I think so. It's a very, I'm not God, so I don't know. Yes. Yeah, I think that we are over the capacity already. We are really exploiting everything, all the resources. We are wasting a lot. But despite being a very tiny proportion of the living being on the planet. So I think that we really need to reinvent the way of living more sustainable on this planet, because of course One Health is also linked to Sustainable Development Goals, and Ilaria Capua is really promoting this idea of circular health that is related to the roadmap of 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that this should be really inspiring, because it's really One Health, the agenda of the United Nations, because all the different goals are really linked. we have to embrace the idea that science cannot be useful to community if we are not able to transfer what we do in our daily life to something that is meaningful for communities. For this, we need to teach our policymakers how to work in a different way, because we are not linear. The problem that we are facing are very complex, and we need really to put all the strength that we have to understand what is happening. And also, we don't have one solution for everybody. And so we really need to think, and we have the election next week. So I hope in Europe, we will really embrace the Green Deal in a proper way, but I don't think that our government are so happy about it. So I'm always optimistic because I'm a scientist, but anyway, I think that as scientists, we don't have to think about only publishing in scientific journal. We need to talk with communities. We need to talk with policymakers. We need to advocate for a change. We need to advocate for a change because we have the data to demonstrate what it will work.
Okay, so I thank you guys. Well, this is not the end of this because tonight at dinner I will get back on that with you. But I thank you, and it's time for the next speaker. Camila González-Rosas. She's the director of the biology department of the University of, how can I call it in English? Los Andes, en español, porque my Spanish is I will go back with shift back to English. So, and she's giving us like a very interesting lecture, the last one for the morning, like predicting the future vectors and possible vector-borne disease scenarios in Europe. And so the audience is yours. Please stay in your 20 minutes. Otherwise,
thank you. I will put the chronometer.
And we will have like 3 minutes questions.
Okay, so thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here sharing with you. I had to study a lot because I do work with climate change, but especially in America. So having to study how it's happening in Europe, it's a way to see it from a different perspective. So the most important thing is that climate change is happening now. It's not a distant scenario. It's not something that someone else will need to take care of. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind. We had the goal after the Paris Agreement to limit the increase of temperature by 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. However, the past year, we had the highest recorded temperatures, and Europe is warming at twice the rate of the global average. And for the first time also past year, during the COP28, they included health for the first time. So this subject of having health as the center of the conversations, both from the climate change perspective and biodiversity perspective, is very important. The goal of having a net zero by 2040 will require the emissions from Europe's energy to fall by 3 times the current rate. And what we know is that we are failing to achieve that goal, and we are failing to cut emissions. So 90% of the greenhouse gases are related to human emissions. And what is predicted is that in the next 50 years, we will have an increase of up to 3.5 degrees. And in this scenario, vector-borne diseases are expected to increase both the transmission seasons and the distribution ranges. What we know is that vector-borne diseases are highly susceptible to climate. Vectors are ectothermic animals, so they depend on the external temperature. And what we know is that with increased temperature, incubation periods will decrease, the life cycle of vectors will decrease, and we will have an increase in survival, reproduction rates, and these 2 variables together will lead to an increase in abundances and geographic ranges, and of course, an increase in transmission risk. And as you know, and as Alessandra was telling, many variables are affecting these transmission cycles, not only land use and farming practices, but also how the capacities of the public health systems are, and how are humans getting exposed to vectors. So many variables influence these changes in transmission cycles. And from the perspective of climate change, we know that, particularly in Europe, globalization is what is bringing exotic diseases and vectors to the countries. We know that there have been range expansions, but also contractions of vector-borne diseases. And we know that the variability in weather and the extreme weather events are also causing changes in vector and host populations. So what we expect in Europe is to have shifts in spatial and temporal distribution and prevalence for vector-borne diseases. I will use this framework, the Lancet countdown. I don't know if you all are familiar, but after the Paris Agreement, this initiative was created. It's an international, I don't know how to remove that black box, but it's an international, oh, thank you, initiative to track the, or to monitor the commitments that were established during the Paris Agreement. Well, doesn't matter. Okay, thank you. So the Lancet countdown is this commitment to track how we are doing. It is an initiative that is funded by the Wellcome Trust, and it uses 47 indicators to monitor how are we doing. And it was launched, the Europe report, this year. And we also have the Latin American report that was launched this year, but includes the analysis done for the past year. And what is very interesting is that if you see from the European perspective, it says unprecedented warming demands unprecedented action. So the call for Europe is to act, while the call for Latin America is to develop in a climate resilient and health-centered way. So it is important to note that Latin America only contributes 9% of the greenhouse emissions. However, it's a region that is suffering the effects of climate change. So you can see that from different geographic regions, you have different commitments and different perspectives on how to act. This framework states has different indicators, and I will use this, the 1.3 indicator that is about climate sensitive infectious diseases. And as you can see, 6 of them are target, and 5 out of the 6 are vector-borne diseases. So for West Nile virus, as you know, it is transmitted by Culex vectors, particularly in Europe. They belong to the Culex pipiens complex. And what we know is that we are having increasing outbreaks in Europe. So since 2010, we are having yearly epidemics. And in 2022, we had the largest epidemic, including 104 deaths. And here you can see the distribution of this outbreak is increasing with the red areas showing the latest outbreaks in 2020. In this work, I like to highlight that Diana was telling Luigi that Diana was a student at the Universidad de los Andes, and she, was first author for this very interesting study where they tried to show how the contribution of climate change explains the increase in the distribution of suitable areas for West Nile transmission in Europe. So what they did was basically to take all the variables except for climate, to try to compare if without climate change, an increase was also expected. And here, what you can see in the first row, there are the maps, including climate change. And in this row, we have without climate change. And what we see is that in the absence of historical climate change, the estimated West Nile virus ecological suitability map remains similar through the studied period. So it is surprising that we still need to demonstrate that climate change is causing an effect on the distribution of vector-borne diseases, but we still need to provide evidence to convince policymakers that we need to take action. And for the Lancet report, what we are seeing here is that they track the events for the past years, and they try to see like or to calculate the increases. And what we have here is that the relative increase in West Nile virus outbreaks in the period between 2013 and 2022 compared with the period of 1951 and 60 had an increase of 256%. And the largest increase was in Eastern Europe with 516% and Southern Europe. So here they highlight that there was an increase in the intensity, frequency, and geographical expansion of West Nile virus outbreaks. That high temperatures accelerate capacity of West Nile virus vectors, exacerbating virus transmission, and that increasingly dry conditions promote contact between birds and mosquitoes around water sources. For dengue, chikungunya, and Zika viruses, what we know is that we have Aedes albopictus widely distributed in Europe. These are the maps from the ECDC. So you can see here Aedes albopictus, and this is the prediction of where it can be distributed in the region, while here you have Aedes aegypti, and the predictions are quite low. It seems that climate is restricting the distribution of Aedes aegypti in the region. However, we know that there have been outbreaks for arboviruses, so chikungunya in France and Italy, and dengue in France, Croatia, Italy, and Spain. And by Aedes aegypti, there was an outbreak in Portugal in 2013 caused by Aedes aegypti. What the Lancet Countdown highlights is that there has been an absolute increase in the suitability areas for these diseases, particularly again in Eastern Europe and Southern Europe. And in 2022, we had the largest epidemic with autochthonous dengue cases, 65 cases in France. And what they could see was that the R North had a relative increase of almost 56% in the recent period. They see similar patterns for chikungunya and Zika, and they also see that the dengue transmission season is extended by 0.4 months. Also, imported cases have increased by 177% across Europe, and the highest relative increase is observed in Northern Europe and followed by Southern Europe. For malaria, here we have an environmental suitability map. And it is interesting that here what we are seeing is like the union of different variables, both environmental variables, as you are seeing here. So rice fields, permanently irrigated land, and sport and leisure facilities as areas where it will be more likely to have transmission spots. But also these maps includes the component of the likelihood of having imported cases. So these areas that you are seeing here in green, the darker, is the more suitable area having this into account. So what we know is that we had like many malaria cases reported, but almost all of them were travel related. We don't have autochthon transmission so far. And there is a consistent increase in the transmission suitability in non-urban areas. As you can see from the map, Greece, North Macedonia, and Romania, no, that's not in the map. They had a reduction in the length of suitable seasons, and mainly the most important situation for malaria are the imported cases. However, here with the Lancet report, what we see is that there is not a consistent pattern, and we are having areas where the suitability is reduced, while there are areas where it increases. So here you can see the orange bars show the suitability in months, and here you see where we are like having less suitable periods of time for transmission. And maybe the most important part is that here they manage to predict the distribution for parasites. Usually what we see is that they are calculating distribution for vectors, which are evidently susceptible to climate, but here we are having predictions for the parasites. So here you see the prediction for Plasmodium vivax, which is the species that is causing most malaria cases in Europe. But here you have also a prediction for falciparum. Regarding leishmaniasis, it's interesting because this is an endemic disease. So as opposed to the other diseases, which are imported diseases, this one is an endemic disease. And what we are seeing is an increase in the distributional range to the northern parts of Europe. What is estimated is that sandflies are located in regions with periodic temperatures above 15 degrees, that sandflies species are expected to expand their range in Europe, and that it is already happening. So I wanted to show you very fast work that we hope to submit very soon with Simona. And what we did was we predicted the spatial distribution for the Leishmanian phantom vectors in Italy and Sergentomia minuta. And what I want to show is that we don't have like a general trend or a general pattern for all species in all regions, but we have different specifically like shifts in distribution. So here I will show you that these are predictions. These are climate change predictions for 2 periods of time. And for example, for Phlebotomus perniciosus, you can see that we are predicting an increase in the elevation distribution. For Phlebotomus perfilievi, as you can see, the predictions are not that obvious as they were for the previous species, because we are having like a reduction for the first prediction and then an increase for the next prediction. And for Sergentomia minuta, we are having the largest expansion predicted. So this is to highlight that each species behaves different and that we need to do this local analysis as well as broad scale analysis to better understand what will happen with vectors. And the last disease that this report has as an indicator is the climate suitability for ticks. And basically what we see is that we have a projection or a shift to higher latitudes and altitudes, increasing the risk in some parts of Northern and Central Europe. So as concluding remarks, there is an expansion of the areas suitable for the transmission of vector-borne diseases in Europe. I think that we need to have integrated surveillance for multiple pathogens, and also surveillance done specifically to try to track these altitudinal and latitudinal changes. Also, I would like to highlight that studies at national level are very important for decision making. And it is important to know that although we are improving public health services, we think that climate change will make these challenges more difficult and more costly. As I said in the first slide, it's happening now, and we need to act now, and we don't have time to wait, like to adapt or to mitigate, right? And highlighting the case of Aedes aegypti, we know that it seems likely that it will have suitable areas to invade Europe. And of course, it will be a great challenge because it will likely come with dengue epidemics, autochthonous dengue epidemics. And that's it. I have 1 minute.
Thank you, Camila. I think I will be moving in probably the Arctic now. After your nice information, I think I will build myself some ice house and then live there. Now, I think it's really interesting concluding this morning session with this information, because I cannot agree more when you say it's already happening, and this is the message we have to send, especially to policymakers, which apparently don't have this actually in mind, and they still, like, I don't know, well, I know in many situations they don't apply the proper and develop the proper policy to stop this. It's kind of scary. Some of the data you presented, I wasn't fully aware of. Like, for instance, like, I was surprised about the contribution of like Southern and Western Europe, was it that? Eastern Europe, to like basically the raising temperature, the global change in temperature that we are going through. And this is very interesting because I don't know if you know, Sardinia is basically more close to Africa than to Italy, no? Which I know you agree. So we think we are African people, and also like geologically, like the lake is Africa. Like we belong to the African continent.
It's the mother of everyone.
Yes, but we are part of it. And like when I remember when like when I talk about an animal disease, like when blue tongue appeared. And first, it appeared in Sardinia and in Corsica, and then spread to Italy, and now it reached like Scotland and further north. And when I remember when we started talking about blue tongue, like we were trying to understand why it was coming, you know, that now, why now? And some people were already like trying to suggest that probably that, you know, increasing temperature was promoting the movement of vector or suitable vector, and so this was the reason. But it was like normally like dismissed, this idea, like it was, oh no, it's like animal movement, like you don't need to change, you know, to look for like global climate change. And now we know this is going on, so it's very, very important, I think, because, you know, like this situation will impact not only the survival of human, but also of animal species, because, you know, there are evidence that vectors and diseases are not going to be like to stay in one species, they are going to move all around. So
no, mosquitoes and diseases travel by plane.
yeah,
That's something we know.
yeah, we know.
So
I know. We know. And there are questions from the audience. Alessandra?
Thank you, Camila, for a very interesting presentation. I think a blue tongue case study, I think, should be brought to a wider, also human side, because the Kulex are Kulex at the end. So even if, but my question is, there is now a big trend in climate change to adopt nature-based solution. We work a lot with the physicists dealing with that, but they don't include in their model the ecology of vectors. So what is your thinking about this kind of nature-based solution? Because of course we have this picture that is what is happening now, working business as usual. But we are expecting in a very short time, because these projects are becoming more and more popular, to modify the environment again to adopt nature-based solution. So what about vectors?
I'm always having like this, the feeling that if you try to understand or address these questions from a broad perspective, you are missing some details. So you will also need to go the other side and try to complete the model with local and small scale modeling, because you can couple epidemiological models with climate change models. And so there are some experiments of trying to do that, like try to use physiological models, for example, trying to include all the variables that affect the transmission cycle, so incubation period, longevity, size, all of those variables, try to couple that with the prediction models. So it's challenging, but I think that you always need to check the local scale and then go to the global or the regional scale. Because as we were talking, these transmission outbreaks occur at a local level. So you need to understand very well what is happening locally so that you can estimate what will happen next. So yes, I used to do ecological modeling for a long time. And I think that we also need to address small scale questions, because if you are not aware of the local ecology, you will miss the opportunity, for example, to control an outbreak. So it is good to have these maps, and it is good to know how general patterns are behaving. But I think that it is more important, for example, to increase local surveillance and to understand the local biology of transmission cycles. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, I want you also to include these indicators that you showed in their models, because they do this. If we plant more trees, this and that, we expect this decrease in temperature. Yes, but what about the biology of vectors? So do we have to include indicators of the outcome of your solution in the number of cases of diseases in animals, humans? I don't know.
And as you were saying, from the perspective of nature-based solutions, I am not sure that this will be a game changer for transmission cycles, because you will already have the transmission cycles urbanized. Like, no, if you think for leishmaniasis or for these diseases, it's not that by recovering forests, you will have the transmission cycles moving backwards to forested areas. They are already urbanized, and I think that it is very hard to. I mean, humans are an infinite blood source. So once vectors are adapted to humans, it is very hard to revert these transmission cycles, or to mitigate these transmission cycles.
Okay, so thank you.
Can I ask you one question?
We have no time. Please,
The lunch is not there. Camila, I just want to go back to the work you're doing with Simona. Is there these maps here? Do they consider the interaction of the parasite with the vector?
No.
Okay.
These are just vector distribution.
Okay. Very, very good. You see? Domenico.
may I have time?
Domenico.
Domenico.
Congratulations
So everybody will,
for your talk, Camila. I just probably I misunderstood when you at the beginning you said that the increase in the temperature would have restricted the distribution with the Saturday, but then your main conclusion you said that as would be expected, yes, that also NSAG could be introduced and so sporadic in Europe. So this is just probably I didn't understand it correctly. But my question was is about if there is any prediction about the increase in temperature and the resistance, the appearance of phenomenal resistance to the insecticides in transports. Because this is a major issue, considering that there is a lot of studies on that. But I don't know whether there is any association with or any prediction with increase in temperature and the resistance, appearance of resistance.
Thank you, Domenico. No, so regarding this, what it is expected is that at some point with temperature increase, the areas that are suitable for the establishment of Aedes aegypti will increase. So it's like right now, there are no suitable areas in terms of the available temperatures that we are experiencing. But it seems that with increased temperatures, that barrier will break and it will be established. And regarding insecticide resistance, I didn't see any comment on that with this, well, with the reviews that I checked. So I think that they are not taking this into account. But of course, it's as antibiotic resistance, it's something that needs to be addressed.
okay. So thank you. So thanks for being with us at this lab session.
Okay. Alison has a bit different role in this workshop. She's the facilitator for, yeah, you are. Surprise, surprise. And oh, let me close this because it's annoying. Can I stop the streaming?
Yes.
That's cool. This is yours?
No.
Because I lost mine. So, no. I have one which is, I'm missing one, but